So I ordered this kit for this ultrasonic levitator. We can make things float. I've got some video of that we'll show you. And I started playing with it. I made a recording, and there was lots and lots of noise on the recording. So I sent it over to Dan White. He's an engineering professor at Valpo and Tinkerer, and he knows a lot about sound and audio. And so he's going to help to explain what was going on and answer my questions. So I warned him we're going to try to do this for kind of a public audience. We'll see how much math and phase relations we get into the discussion. That'll be tricky. All right. Okay, so I sent you a video.
Yeah.
And that was me putting drops of water in here. And I actually tried to do this as a demonstration over Zoom. And they said, go ahead and start the demonstration. I started talking and showing what they're doing. And then, a couple minutes later, they said, okay, Paul, you're going to start the demonstration now. So what was happening, I believe, is this thing, even though it's at 40 kilohertz, was making so much noise in my microphone that Zoom was just squelching everything I was saying. So they could see what I was doing and watching water drops around, but they couldn't hear a thing I was saying. So we'll see if the first part of this video we just recorded with this on works at all.
Right.
But there were a couple of interesting observations from the video I sent you with the water drop going in there. One is that we're getting this noise on I was using my iPhone camera at the time, we're getting this noise on the iPhone, and the other was that the noise seemed to change a lot. So we drop a drop of water in there, it would change, it would sort of make this whole weird sort of set of sounds as the water drop was falling through that space.
Yeah.
Do you have an explanation for that?
Before we get back to Dan's explanation, let me give you a little background. The Tiny Lev Acoustic Levitator kit is available online from a few sources. It was designed by a group of people at the University of Bristol in the United Kingdom. The Tiny Lev consists of an array of 72 ultrasonic transducers driven by an Arduino circuit. The transducers are in two groups, one above and one below. Along a line centered between the two groups, an intense wave pattern forms in the air, which is capable of suspending small pieces of plastic or drops of liquid. Before I play the next video segment, let me apologize for the noise. I want you to hear it because the noise has some strange features that I wanted to ask Dan about. And also let me say that Dan congratulated me on nerd sniping him with this video. That's the term for when a scientist or engineer is asked a really tricky question that makes him or her spend hours researching and studying the answer.
Yeah, so one of the things is this is at 40 kilohertz, 40,000 hertz.
So I couldn't hear a thing. Why does my phone hear that?
Well, your phone is probably, I think it said it was sampling at 44 kilohertz, 44.1 kilohertz, which is the same that old school CDs are recorded at. So it makes sense that it's a common one.
It can pick it up. It can't play that back to me, but I hear something.
Yeah. There's this rule called Nyquist rate that says that whatever you sample at, you can only really pick up sounds that go up to half of that. So if we sample at 44 kilohertz, we can only hear or record accurately up to 22.
22 kilohertz, that's like the upper limit of human hearing, right?
Yeah, just
some people can hear a little higher, younger people.
Right,
yeah.
Babies, and so on, could maybe barely hear up there. The last time I tested myself, which was several years ago, I could hear 18.
Yep.
And then kind of nothing above that. And
students are familiar with mosquito ringtones.
Yes.
And these play in 18, 20 kilohertz range. High school students can hear them, but their 40 or 50-year-old teachers cannot.
So there's certain strategies for that, yeah.
You can have their phones in class and nobody knows.
So one of the effects with this sampling with this rate that we're doing is this 40 kilohertz that these transmitters are are driving at is higher than that 22. It's higher than that half. So when it's higher than the half, we're going to get these artifacts, we call them aliases, that look like they're lower frequencies than they actually are. And it's really a folding about that 22. So if I'm at 23, it'll look like it's at 21. If I'm at 24, it'll look like it's at 20. And I actually can't tell. So after you do that, you can't tell. The alias, just like an alias, somebody's different name, you're called this, how do I know anything different? So in the recording that you sent me, there were some of those aliases at frequencies that you could hear in the playback, but I know weren't present because this wasn't broadcasting loudly at that. The really cool part was when you were dropping the drops, you'd hear this bloop sort of noises, and also as the phone was moving around, you could also hear whooshes and things.
At first I thought I wasn't being very careful with how I was holding the phone and just making a lot of noise, but you didn't think it was that.
No, I don't. I could hear, of course, some handling noise,
Uh-huh.
from the microphone, but these were kind of lowish bloops, sort of stuff. I think what was happening is that this is so loud, it's outside of our hearing, but it was so loud that the sound waves were coming to the microphone on your phone, and then when they hit that surface, they were getting doubled. We call it a boundary condition. The air had to stop moving, its velocity had to be 0 because that was the phone. But then that also makes the pressure double at that. Same thing that happens on the wall. That's why when you stand in the corner of a room, that's usually where the loudest bass is. It's exactly the same effect. And in the corner, that's where everything kind of builds up.
Okay. Because it has to reflect off the wall, you're getting the incoming and an outgoing
Right.
pressure wave adding together, so it doubles. All right.
Yeah. And that's why we put sound fluffy stuff near the wall, because it's highest pressure there. Well, at that, when that pressure doubles, we know that we like to think that air is nice and what we call linear. If it's twice as loud, it's twice as loud. Well, we easily forget that we can't go negative pressure. We can get really, really high pressures, but as we can't go below vacuum, right? So we always have to have positive numbers. And that gives us a little bit of curve in the pressure. Pressure versus, I guess, loudness. It's going to change the shape.
Okay.
Well, anytime you change the shape on a sine wave, it's distortion.
If we picture the sine wave we learned about in geometry class, we tend to think of that as centered around 0. But a sound wave in air is centered around the static nominal pressure in the room. So there's a higher positive offset on the pressure. As we increase the amplitude of the sound, this can't happen, where the lower part of the sine wave goes below 0 pressure. So rather than getting a shape like this, the sine wave is changed. It never reaches 0 pressure.
And there's other frequencies that are generated because of that. Well, some of those frequencies are higher than what came in, and then they're also lower. I think we were hearing the lower ones, and they were blooping. They weren't constant because there was also motion happening. Motion happening from the phone, from the water going through these waves, and that gave us some Doppler effect on top of it. So when a car, comes towards you, it sounds higher pitched. As it goes away, it goes, the siren or whatever gets lower pitched. I think that was happening at the same time.
So I'm not moving, 50 miles an hour like the car or something, but because this is such a high frequency, we're sensitive to a small motion.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think the wavelength of these 40 kilohertz is like 6 millimeters, something like that.
Okay.
So
And does that make sense for seeing, we could suspend these in here, it looks like maybe half a wavelength, right?
right,
So we should, okay,
right.
maybe 3 millimeters apart?
So just moving the phone a half wavelength or a one wavelength is going all the way around the circle, so to speak.
Mhm.
So we don't have to move it very quickly.
Around the circle in the phase space. So,
Right.
Yeah. A whole wavelength then.
Yeah. So moving several wavelengths is really a short distance at these high frequencies, and so we think of Doppler as some, things moving quickly, but that's because the sound that we hear, those wavelengths are super long. Our head, like our ear canal, resonates at near 3 kilohertz,
Okay.
just because of the length of your ear canal, and that's why we're most sensitive to those frequencies. But at 40 kilohertz, the wavelengths are even shorter, so it doesn't take much physical movement to really be skipping wave, going a long ways in terms of wavelengths.
So let me try to summarize. So because we're at these high frequencies and driving the air into kind of a nonlinear region, we're creating these artifacts in the wave in the 40 kilohertz, 20 kilohertz, maybe higher. And because the phone is digitizing that at some fixed level, we're getting recording artifacts that produce this sound at audio frequencies in the human hearing range. Maybe were they around 20 kilohertz, or it seemed like some of them were lower. Their whole bloop thing. Yeah.
One of them was a strong the alias because of the digitizing. I think that was at about 12 or 13 kilohertz,
Okay.
which is about where you would expect. So if you played that back, you would hear this really high-pitched whistle in the recording
Okay.
with all the other noise.
And when I tried to broadcast that over Zoom, Zoom just decides this guy's got a noisy microphone.
Yeah, Zoom.
Cut him off.
Probably Zoom decided that your sound was set up super high, so it automatically set the volume way down. But it was the high frequencies that were so loud, and then the voice just got pushed way down.
Yeah.
I think the most fascinating thing, there's the aliasing, the frequencies that get folded around where your rate is that your phone is working at, or your microphone. That's interesting, and that's pretty predictable. The thing that was fascinating to me was the bloops, because those were not recording artifacts. I believe they were actual noises that were created when the waves were hitting the phone,
Okay.
because it was not linear. And it was the air that was not linear, and not necessarily the phone. Loud enough, you scream into a microphone, it's going to distort. So there's some of that. But I think some of that was also the air itself being not linear and making additional frequencies that we could hear. You can do this with these ultrasound things. Take this array and point it at a wall. And if you change the amplitude, just the loudness of it, if you could somehow hook an audio signal to and make your loudness go up and down with the audio signal, you would hear the sound coming from the wall. It's the reason it just appears there is the high frequencies. We can get nice beams at high frequencies, and then
because you're driving the air into a nonlinear region, it stays together. Is a hand wavy explanation?
The reason you hear it is because now you provide a boundary for it to double pressure. So the sound is getting generated literally at your ears, and that's why it sounds like it's just like inside your head.
So if I point this at you, it decouples inside the ear from the high frequency. Or if I point it at the wall, it's decoupling from the high frequency at the boundary condition.
Right.
Because
that-
it's twice as loud just in front of the wall, and we're pushing it well past the limits of air. Okay, okay.
you could, technically it's there in the beam itself, but when you double it, then it gets a lot louder, and then our ears are immediately going to hear it coming from that.
And this beam is not going to, it doesn't radiate out, so you'd have to be like right in the beam to hear any of it, and
Yeah.
then it's reflecting off your head.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching through to this point. As I said, this question really nerd-sniped Dan. He did a little bit of analysis of the audio, and he said that these explanations, the Doppler shift, the production of audible frequencies at the boundaries, and the aliasing of the high pitches down to lower pitches through the recording artifacts, are his best first guess at what's going on. If you have a different explanation, let me know down in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Don't try this at home. Come over to my house.